Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order this regular meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for Thursday, January the 19th, 2023. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today are located on the Tk'emlúps-Secwépemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwépemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tk'emlúps-Secwépemc and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. I have a number of chairs announcements. So welcome to the meeting and welcome to Director Nancy Bethel, alternate, who is here today at the head table. So the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library is very excited to introduce free family passes to the Big Little Science Center here in Kamloops, just around the corner from us. This is the newest partnership, and it is aimed at making hands-on science accessible in all of our communities. All you need is a library card. This comes just in time for Interior Savings Unplug and Play Family Literacy Week. These passes will provide an invaluable opportunity for TNRD residents to unplug from their screens and explore, discover, and learn together in a fun environment this week and beyond. The passes will work similar to other passes, such as for the BC Wildlife Park, which are available at all TNRD library branches and are free to borrow for any patrons with a valid library card. On to continuing with the library theme, I will be a guinea pig tomorrow afternoon at the Ashcroft Library as they begin to test out their service extender program. Those who were at the library in August or who have been keeping up with the news, very excited to be piloting the service extender in Ashcroft, which will see the library accessible to eligible patrons 52 hours a week instead of 26. The hours at Ashcroft Library will now mimic the hours at the branch here in Kamloops. So people will be able to access the Ashcroft Library before and after regular hours and do all the things they would normally do. They can check out books, they can make photocopies, use the computers, use it for study or a quiet place to be. So I will be heading along there tomorrow to see exactly what that involves. And I'm sure that head librarian Judy Moore will have further updates as this pilot advances. Also, FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, meets every year. The TNRD has a policy whereby every year either 6 or 7 members of the board go to FCM. This year's is in Toronto, next year's is in Calgary, the following year, 2020, math is not my thing. 2025 is in Ottawa. I don't believe they've announced the 2026 location yet. There will be a draw by staff later on today. They will be emailing out the results to tell you which FCM you will be going to. Now, before we do that, anyone who does not want to go to FCM, this is not obligatory, it's not mandatory. So if you would rather not be included in the draw, please feel free to tell staff by the end of the meeting, and then we'll go from there. You are allowed to horse trade. If for some reason Toronto is not your preferred destination, you'd rather go to Ottawa, you can reach out to someone and see about swapping. We just ask that you inform staff within the next week, so that because they're going to have to start making arrangements for Toronto in May fairly quickly. So they need to know the names of those who are going. Director Stamer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually looking forward to the lottery like we did the last time because I've got money on it that I'll be the last one picked this last time. So that's unfortunate.
Well, there will still be a draw. It still will be a lottery. Last time Regina was one of the options, and that seemed to be the least popular option, which I could not understand. But anyway,
But I got the job.
You got to go.
It was really good.
It is an amazing experience to be able to go to FCM. You have municipalities from across the country, large and small, so it really is a great opportunity. So upcoming meetings and events. Tomorrow, January 20th, we have the Hospital District Board meeting, which starts at 10. February 2nd, we have a finance committee meeting. February 2nd, we have a regular board meeting. February 3rd, there is a regional solid waste committee meeting at 10 a.m. This is an additional meeting and has been called for Friday, February the 3rd. Directors appointed to this committee have already received a calendar invitation for the meeting, and the agenda will be sent out approximately 1 week before the meeting. And today in your blue folders, you have any mail that might have been addressed to you in particular, and other items that might be of interest to you as a director. So with that, we move on to item 4, additions to or deletions from the agenda. Note that items 6.3 and the related item 7.2 have both been postponed. Are there any other additions to deletions from? All right, seeing none, we move on to the minutes of the regular board meeting of December the 15th, 2022. We do have a recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Delegations, we have the Thompson-Nicola Conservation Collaborative. We have a presentation from Danielle Topser. All right, thank you. Program manager, she is going to provide an introduction to the Thompson-Nicola Conservation Collaborative and conservation planning for climate change project. So floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to take the time to tell you a little bit about the Thompson-Nicola Conservation Collaborative and some of the work that we do. So as I said, my name is Danielle Topser and I'm the program manager for the TNCC. I'm just going to make sure I can advance this. There we go. So the TNCC was established in 2021 as a response to a collective call to action by agencies, organizations, and communities within the region to strengthen and unify conservation efforts in the Thompson watershed. We take direction from a volunteer steering committee. They represent all levels of government, Indigenous communities, and stewardship organizations. This committee provides leadership, strategic direction, and decision-making capacity to advance our goals and objectives and core program areas. The focus of the collaborative is on 3 main areas. That's protecting clean water, conserving the unique species and spaces, and also promoting sustainable stewardship of the land. We achieve this by supporting and facilitating the collective work of our partners through information sharing, research and collaboration to fill knowledge gaps, and identifying conservation priorities and streamlining conservation efforts. In case you didn't know, BC's dry interior, including the Thompson-Nicola, is one of 11 places that's been designated as a priority place for species at risk in Canada. This is a federally identified designation. And priority places are specific locations that are high in biodiversity values, and that also have significant concentrations of species at risk. And the Thompson-Nicola includes 45% of that dry interior area and is home to many species at risk, including those that have been, 23 species at risk that are globally species at risk, 57 that are nationally at risk, and 175 species that are at risk provincially. So many at-risk species are found in the Thompson-Nicola due to the sensitive and or rare ecosystems that we have here, and also their ability to support a high degree of biodiversity, and that they provide habitat features that support these threatened plants and animals that are at risk. One of the key sensitive areas in the Thompson-Nicola is the grasslands, and I think that's what we're well known for. While they are the rarest type of land cover in the province, they also support approximately 1/3 of BC's species at risk. Another sensitive ecosystem is wetlands, and that includes swamps, marshes, and floodplains. They provide food and breeding grounds and support many forms of fish, birds, and other animal and plant life. They also play a key role in filtering water and protecting against floods. They also regulate greenhouse gases and buffer the impacts of climate change because they draw carbon out of the air. And like grasslands, wetlands are also rare and are at risk of being lost at a rapid rate. Studies have reported that 84% of wetlands in the South Okanagan have been lost, and the Thompson-Nicola is understood to be under the same threat. So in short, by protecting wetlands and grasslands, we can conserve many of the species at risk that are found in this area. One of the key priorities for the TNCC, as shared by our partners, is the development of a regional conservation action plan. So this regional conservation action plan that we'll be working on over 2023 is a 3-year plan to identify critical conservation targets. So that's identified by all the partners. They identify these special areas that need concerted efforts. And we identify those threats that are impacting those efforts or those areas, and then strategies and actions around those. And then through that, we'll focus our conservation efforts and coordinate our actions and our activities amongst all the partners. And this is going to be taking place throughout the Thompson-Nicola watersheds, and input will be taken via workshops, town halls with partners, expert interviews, and community interviews. And like I said, that's taking place over this next year. Additionally, another key priority of the TNCC is a multi-year conservation planning for climate change initiative that's taking place in the Thompson and Okanagan regions and was initiated in the summer of 2022. As populations grow and land is developed, key natural areas are being lost, including grasslands and wetlands, areas which we know are home to a variety of at-risk plants and animals. These special places also provide clean water and food to communities and have cultural significance to Indigenous peoples. In addition, these areas are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The Conservation Planning for Climate Change Initiative will combine Indigenous knowledge and Western science to identify the natural areas across the Thompson and Okanagan that need more protection against the pressures of population growth and development. So we are working with the Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program on this initiative. As I said, they're working in the Okanagan region. We're working in the Thompson-Nicola, and we take guidance from a technical team of advisors, many of whom are planners or conservation biologists. And we're working with the UBC Okanagan researchers to conduct the technical research and modeling component of the project. This map shows the geographic extent of where the work will be taking place. And like I said, the focus is on those areas most under threat from development. So usually around the city center areas. To identify which areas will need increased conservation efforts in the Thompson-Okanagan, we will be combining, along with the Indigenous knowledge and Western science, specifically the climate and ecosystem data. And then also through the Indigenous engagement process, we do have Adams Lake Indian Band counselor on our team. Her name is Shelley Witzke. She's working as our TNCC Indigenous Climate Change Partnerships Coordinator. And through this, we have developed an approach to interview Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders, which includes conducting those interviews and identifying areas that are used for sourcing food, medicinal plants, and areas of cultural and spiritual significance. And we literally mark them on maps. In the spring, this information will all be ground truthed on the land with those knowledge keepers and elders. And then participants are then provided packages that include their interviews and reporting and transcripts. As well, working with the UBCO team on the technical mapping part of the project, the researchers are gathering geospatial data within the project area to map where specific ecosystems are found, mainly focusing on grasslands and wetlands and the lands that connect them. Where existing data is not available, the researchers will conduct a team to lead field surveys to gather that data. And then as climate changes, the areas where the grasslands and wetlands are found will change and shift. And we know that. So to plan for that, we are developing a predictive climate change modeling program with this data, which will incorporate the ecosystem data to identify where those areas will be found in the future as climate changes advances into 2050 and 2080. So by combining and layering this data and the Indigenous knowledge, we'll identify the natural areas that require increased conservation efforts. As a separate phase of this project, We will be working with local and provincial governments and indigenous communities to support review and updating and potential development of new policies, planning guidelines, and sustainable land use practices. In the future, we are working with OCCP, that's the Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program right now, to incorporate the conservation prioritization data into an online planning tool. So this will be ready through OCCP later on this summer, but it will be, as an initial phase, available to the Okanagan land use planners and conservation organizations and Indigenous communities. And it is expected that we will be able to use it in other regions as well shortly thereafter. So in short, the conservation of these priority natural areas are important to us in the future and will help us protect the region's biodiversity and ultimately support the reduction of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. I invite you to take the time to learn more about the TNCC. Please reach out to me if you have any questions at all. I'd be more than happy to connect. And I just wanted to, last slide here is for you to show you who our funders are. We have a tremendous wealth of experience and knowledge and great partnerships. And we're appreciative to have those. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And are there any questions or comments? Director Bass?
Thank you. That's really fascinating. Are you working at all with Locke Fraser at True? Because
I'm
he might-
sorry.
Are you working at all with Lachlan Fraser at True? Because he might have an awful lot of this information already gathered.
So Locke Fraser, I do know Locke Fraser quite well. There is some data that's been gathered for sure. The UBCO researchers are working with and have their fingers on the pulse of where information is available. Also working with, we have a number of contacts with the Ministry of what? Yes. So in short, yes. Thank you.
Director Houghton?
Thanks, Danielle. I'm a director on the area south of Kamloops and down the Thompson River to Pritchard, and involved in the ranching community. And when as much as I agree with a lot of things you're doing, I get my hackles up a little bit because sometimes a lot of this land is deeded land owned by the ranching community or whomever. And sometimes there's not enough collaboration on trying to protect something on somebody else's land. And just wondering, are you working solely on Crown land, or are you working with the landholders within the area I explained?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And our work spans multiple jurisdictions. Certainly, we do have a stewardship part of the work that we do that works directly with private land managers. And that's more about creating best practices and working with landowners to help integrate these best practices.
Now, do you work with British Columbia Cattlemen's Association or Grasslands Conservation Council or those kind of folks?
Yes, we do. We've so in the inception of the TNCC, both of those partners provided input into the development of the organization. And while I've only been in place for a year, I have yet to connect directly with BC Cattlemen's about the work that we're doing, but I do work very closely with Grasslands Conservation Council.
I strongly suggest that you work with those kind of agencies with the, because a lot of the land south of Kamloops is deeded land owned by the ranching community. And my feeling is a lot of the time is they've owned the land for 100 years and doing a pretty good job at conserving. And sometimes they get left out in the cold when these other organizations come. And I agree with totally what you're trying to do, but sometimes communication falls apart. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great point. And I think land managers such as ranchers are one of the best land managers that we have. I agree.
Thank you. I have Directors Smith, Bethel, and then Rain.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We actually have a project we've been working on for a really long time, a wetland project in Logan Lake that we've been working on with BCIT. And they've been restoring a wetland that sort of acts as a filtration into our lake. And one of the pieces that we are missing, though, is Indigenous knowledge. So maybe there's an opportunity to partner with you folks as well in some way to bring in that piece, because it has been probably ongoing for 15 years or more on this particular piece. So it may be of interest to you as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bethel.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation, the beautiful photographs. In terms of the work that you've done, have you gotten any agreements with any of the First Nations or local governments to incorporate your findings into their planning process?
Yeah, thank you for that. We have been doing a lot of interviews to date with Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders, and we do have a protocol that it's a written agreement to incorporate this knowledge. When it comes to sensitive and cultural areas, we put a 300-meter buffer around them on the map because there is obviously a lot of sensitivity around this data, and this data will not be shown for the public on the maps, but it will be accessible for land use planners as to what areas are sensitive and culturally and historically used.
A supplementary, what I was trying to ask is that you're coming up with a whole bunch of information and processes. Have you gotten local governments, any local governments to agree to use your findings in their planning process, or any First Nation governments to agree to use your findings in their planning process?
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, we work with City of Kamloops quite closely on this project, and we'll be working with their planning team as we move through the science gathering piece of it. As well, they're on our advisory team, and we do have a technical advisory team for this project, of which City of Kamloops is part of. And also we do have a number of Indigenous partners that are part of it as well. And also they both join our TNCC steering committee, which is almost like a board of directors, but it's our steering committee. Same. Thank you.
Director Rain.
Thank you.
Sharon.
A little bit following along the lines of Director Bethel. She had my third question. Kind of first, I mean, what authority do you have to coordinate with TNRD committees like Fraser Basin, the Shuswap watershed, or land use planning? Is there some authority? And I guess I'll go back to my first question was, who's funding TNCC? And where does the mandate come from? And then the third question is, what authority do you have to bring all these groups together?
So if I think I understand the question. So the authority, we are a collaborative. So we're not a registered charity. We do have a fiscal partner. That's the Thompson-Nicola Tourism Association. They hold our funds, but we don't have registered charity status. We are a collection or collaborative of partners. So it's not a legal entity, but through our partners, we deliver on conservation initiatives and efforts collectively. Our funders, my slide's not up there. We do have a range of funding, from private funding. We have federal funding, we have provincial funding. So Environment and Climate Change Canada is one of our funders. The Ministry of Waterland, Resource Stewardship, Sitka Foundation, Habitat Conservation Trust Fund, Real Estate Foundation of BC. We have a fairly broad suite of funders. Did I answer your questions?
Yeah, and I guess, so where's the mandate come from? We're bringing all these groups together. What authority do you have, or is this just a goodwill gesture on behalf of all of these groups who are financing you?
For sure. The mandate for our work and what we do comes from our partners. So through our steering committee, a number of our partners, we have 15 that currently sit on our steering committee. They give us the mandate, the mandate on the work that they want to see us do. So part of it is this conservation planning for climate change program. It's the conservation action plan. It's really intended to be, there's a lot of great groups that are doing great work, but it's meant to help communicate what each other is doing, because that's a big lack right now. Also help to focus some efforts, streamline some funding. And we're working, we put in an application to work with Secwepemc Fisheries Commission, for instance. So we work with a number of partners to advance different conservation initiatives, but also to communicate what each other is doing.
Thank you.
And Director Getz.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a question. My area is Merritt, and we had the floods last year. Along with that, a lot of wetlands was destroyed.
Mhm.
A lot of breeding grounds for fish and birds were removed. So we are now with DMAF opening, getting ready to start flood mitigation with First Nations inclusion.
Mhm.
Does your group have anyone talk to your group about being around for that when it starts to happen? Because once it happens, it's going to happen fast. And I was just wondering, today is the first day I've heard of your organization. I'm just wondering if you are aware of when we start to do this, that we'll probably need all the help we can get. Thank you.
Thank you. I am aware and I do join there is a Nicola Watershed Roundtable. And I do sit on those meetings occasionally, not all the time, recognizing that a lot of the work that seems to be happening at that table is a lot of restoration and recovery work. And that's not necessarily where TNCC does our work at this point. It's not to say we won't in the future, but we're there to support other partners and looking to see what those future actions will be that come out of that. So certainly being part of that and knowing what's going on is a big part for us, but it's also knowing that there are a lot of groups doing things right now at that table.
So just a supplemental thing, the cold water with the high rate of water that ran through,
Mhm.
there's not going to be a fish migration in 4 years. Basically, everything's been destroyed.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if does your group track that kind of thing or is involved with any kind of, the fear now is that we may not get a proper
Yeah.
return of the fish to that area because the grounds are gone.
Mhm.
Any eggs that were there for next year are gone. So I'm just wondering if your group has anything to do with that kind of thing at all.
We do have work that's along the lines of the work that we are doing for sure. We've been speaking with a couple of the bands in that area about efforts and about funding that's available to help support those efforts. So definitely it's on the radar. It's a matter of lining up with funding to see what we can do. And with the First Nations too, there's a lot of it is talking about capacity and how we can support in ways that they need. If that makes sense. Sorry? I do have a card. Yes, please. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you again very much for your presentation, and I understand you do have cards available, so anyone who's interested, perhaps you could leave a few for anyone to pick up.
Sure. I'd be
That would
happy
be
to.
great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
We move along to item 6.2, which is a building infraction, expired permits on Tonquah Lake Road. Corporate Officer Campbell, is there anyone here to speak to this?
Chair Roden, no, there are not, but I thought just for the benefit of new members on the board, I might just point out what the purpose of this opportunity for owners to make representations to the board is all about. So under the legislation, owners or their agents have to be given the opportunity to make representations to the board, or in the case of a municipality, a council regarding a recommendation that comes before them to file a notice on title. So this portion of the agenda, when you see section 57 recommendations, is actually technically considered a hearing. So the board is sitting in a sort of quasi judicial role, and you're obligated to hear any representations that owners make and take that into consideration before you make a decision.
Thank you very much. So there is no one here to make a representation. Item 6.3, as noted, has been postponed. We move on to item 6.4, another building infraction, an expired permit in electoral area J. And Corporate Officer Campbell, is there anyone here to speak to this?
There's not.
Thank you very much. We move on to item 7.1, building infraction, expired permits on Tonquah Lake Road. We do have a recommendation. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this? No. All right, on the motion then, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Item 7.2 has been postponed. We move on to item 7.3, expired permit electoral area J. There is a staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, comments? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Section 8. Bylaws. We have zoning amendment bylaw number 2795, Heffley Lewis Creek Road in electoral area P. And there are two recommendations. Thank you, Director Morris. Second. Thank you. Any discussion on this? This is the third reading following a public hearing. No. On the question, then all those in favor? That is carried. Recommendation 2. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. 8.2. Zoning amendment bylaw number 2796. We have two recommendations for a third reading and adoption.
Recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. We have a second recommendation for adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All the question, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Temporary use permit number TUP 65, Lewis Creek Road, Whitecroft, Upper Lewis Creek Road, Whitecroft. We have staff recommendations. Thank you. Second. This is first reading. Are there any questions? No? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We have a second recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Section 9, development applications, 9.1. Hoyle Road electoral area M. And we do have a recommendation. Thank you. Do we have any comments? Director Laird?
I can do that in 2 minutes. Under. So it is indeed a complex property. It's about 15.5 acres, 6 point something hectares. The current owner purchased it last May. It is 3/4 or probably a little more than that ALR. However, it is zoned industrial I3 because this is the length and the length of the property was along the former Kettle Valley Railway. And this is where the Craig mine would load their ore onto. So it was zoned industrial and was probably used industrial for decades. It was, along with the surrounding lands, posited into the ALR in about 1973. And so the current owner, when he purchased it, he didn't do his due diligence, I would venture, because he was surprised by some of these attributes of the property. There was complaints because there was, amongst a number of things, fill, noise, dust, RVs, etc. This application is a result of ALC enforcement. Normally, you wouldn't get soil deposit and removal applications. Those go through a notice of intent directly to the ALC. But because it's after the fact, it's coming to you. There will probably be another application on this property because the current owner would like to rezone it from industrial. It is not, or at least 3/4 of the land from industrial to residential, country residential, which we've told him we would support. So, and last, I would say so at this point, because it's your first ALR application, correct? All right, so it's going to be more than 2 minutes. Can I have another minute? ALR applications are not for local government to approve. You can support them and forward them with your support to the ALC. Their panels and their chair have the final say, but you have the power to deny them. So you can be a gatekeeper and stop them. Our boards traditionally have not done that. Our boards have sometimes recommended to the ALC to deny them. But you do have the power to deny them outright, but you don't have the power to approve them. So again, this is very unusual that you'd be getting a soils application. And last, one of the issues raised by we have an agriculture advisory commission that is appointed by this board. They're a collection of ranchers, vegetable growers, market gardeners, etc. Staff usually follow their recommendation in our reports that come to you. And they flagged some concern with what soils have been brought to this land. So if you remove soil, like strip soils from ALR land, you got to deal with the ALC. If you bring fill, whatever that fill is, onto the land, and this land is in the vicinity of the Nicola River, you also need to submit a notice of intent. So there was several, I think double the permitted. They allow some import of materials. I think it's 1,000 square meters. Here it's double that. That was already on the land. Plus, Mr. Coyle, the owner, or pardon me, Mr. Arnold, the owner, brought like I don't know, 50 dump trucks of soils from the flood in Merritt. So they pulled the tests on those, and the 8 locations that brought all that soil onto this ALR land tested clean. One from the public works yard had some excess, was flagged for a bit of excess chloride iron, which is basically salt that you would use as part of public works. So, and all that information and your recommendation, whatever it is, will be passed on to the ALC, or not your recommendation, your resolution, pardon me, will be passed on to the ALC. I think that's covered it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this? I have Director Middleton.
Sorry, thanks. I just note in the report that there was an indication that there had been testing done on those materials, but those test results weren't included or were not supplied. So is there a risk that we're sort of saying this is okay, but we still don't know what kind of materials we are actually agreeing to leave there?
Yeah. So first, no, I would say it's not a risk for you. There is from the time, like our deadline for these is what, last week, and we write them ahead. So sometimes things come in. Since the time of writing, we've gotten the report, and it's like 560 pages. So you don't want that. It will be forwarded. This information will be forwarded to the ALC, but also, so that's from the materials that were brought from Merritt. But there was also an industrial history of this land. So part of any building permit or rezoning, which, like I said, was probably going to be coming your way, the owner of the land has to undertake some testing under the contaminated sites regulation. It's a provincial regulation that we broker. So he has pulled soil samples, and they're with a lab. So that'll be coming down the line. So that does nothing to do with this. That has to do with the history of the property.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on this item? All right, we do have a recommendation. Thank you. Second? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item 9.2, Agricultural Land Commission application, Yates Creek Road in electoral area P. You have a recommendation. Director Morris makes a motion. Do we have a seconder? Director Hall. Any discussion? No. All right, then we're going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. 9.3 ALR 213 Highway 97C in electoral area N. We do have a recommendation. Thank you, Director Graham, second. Director Stankey, any discussion? Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question. When we're making a recommendation, I noticed in the report that it talked about the riparian area and potentially skirting that off. When we make this recommendation, are we able to add that into our recommendation?
Absolutely. Sorry, may I, through the chair? Absolutely, that can be added. That was one of the recommendations of the our AC. There's so many acronyms. And I just flagged this one. I know there was some frustration on the part of the applicant. The days of sort of, how would I put, ambiguous or loose applications to the ALC. This came to the previous board, and you can see on the third page of the report, the area outlined in black was already approved, but they didn't think of everything. So really, the applications have to be complete so they don't have to come back again like this one has. So yes, that can be added to the application, to your recommendation, and it will be forwarded to the ALC.
Would that be a friendly amendment?
So what would you like the addition to read?
That we recommend that there be skirting to protect the riparian area of the creek and Corbett Lake included in the recommendation.
All right, so Corporate Officer Campbell, that would be an amendment.
It's probably me.
Chair Roden, yes, that should properly be an actual amendment. So if Director Thorpe would like to move that, and if someone would like to second it. And Director Thorpe, could you please just repeat it again for the benefit of the recording secretary, that so she has it?
Oh dear, that we make an amendment to recommend skirting to protect the riparian area of Corbett Lake and the existing creek.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we do have an amendment. All those in favor? Carried. So now we are back to the amended motion. Does anyone have any comments, questions, feedback, concerns? Director Middleton?
Just a question is, excuse me. That is a staff recommendation in the report. So by moving this just takes it to part of the actual sort of final say that what's in the report is background information and not part of the recommendation?
Through the chair, I can comment on that. So we provide them with an actual certified resolution, so it will be included in the certified resolution that we provide.
So we do have an amended recommendation. Any comments, questions on it? All right, calling the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. 9.4 Agricultural Land Commission application on Miners Bluff Road, Monty Creek.
Second.
All right, questions? Okay, Director O'Reilly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Director Stiltba. Two questions, one regarding, my understanding was that this outdoor gathering or this indoor gathering space where people could have a wedding or what happens to be sort of started to fall under agritourism, and this could be allowed in ALR land buildings. I understand the building has deficiencies to allow that, but that was my understanding years ago when this all started happening in the Fraser Valley, that agritourism sort of took over and you were allowed to have these sort of gatherings. And then supplemental to that, if you could comment on how this directly impacts our fringe area policy that the city of Kamloops has with TNRD. Thank you.
So try to be brief. The special events regulation, they also have a policy, is very specific as to number of attendees, number of times per year, duration, I think is limited to 24 hours. I'm going by memory. So this is a permanent building, even if it is a greenhouse, it's a permanent greenhouse. So it doesn't come under, and it's, so there's a special events more than agritourism. There's both. This is for a special event and assembly use. I believe the winery has had weddings and what have you, but they have them on the lawn, or they have them in the restaurant, or they have them in the vineyard. I don't know. The applicant is here. So, does that answer the first question? Okay. Second question. Is it fringe area? I think if it was standalone assembly hall for special events, absolutely, it would be of more interest to Kamloops. But I believe it's past the distance. It's a ways out of the actual fringe area is defined. But also, I think, I mean, there's a sort of a, if the city of Kamloops had wineries, I don't think Harper's Trail closer to the city also does some special events. I think there's a real preference and a fit between wineries and weddings. You don't have to travel far for the wine, right?
No, absolutely. And to be clear, I am very in favor of it. I was just wondering how it fell within that policy and if we were
Yeah.
still following with that policy.
So
That's good.
if we get rezonings or major land use changes or rezonings that would trigger subdivision within a certain distance of any municipality, it's further for Merritt and Kamloops because they're bigger. Then we take, before it comes to this board, we send them to that municipality for their review and input. And sometimes that might go to your council, or sometimes, like in the city of Kamloops, it's usually handled by staff.
Director Newstetter?
Thank you through the chair for probably staff. Just for us newbies who need to maybe back it up just a tiny bit, can we have some definition around fringe area policy?
So that's a long question. I can't do that. You know what? I can't do that.
Close notes version.
Yeah, okay. It's important. And it's one reason why we're special. And as a regional district, because we have a cooperative sense, all of you vote on planning things. That's not the case in all regional districts in the province. It's the case with some. So it's why we may not get like a, you know, if somebody is going to be wanting cheap land with lower taxes on the edge of a municipality to develop an industrial complex or a big box store or something, then it's going to go to that municipality, and staff almost always follow the recommendation. It doesn't bind, you know, whatever the municipality says. So often it is Kamloops because somebody wants cheap land for industrial uses and they don't want to do that in Kamloops. So they want to do that, say, in Knutsford, or if they can find some non-ALR. And then the city has a say in it. Often that is historically has been respected by this board, and sometimes the municipality in question, like I know with Chase, there was a multi-lot residential subdivision developed just outside the boundaries of Chase. Chase would absolutely be its service depot, and Chase supported it. It was rezoned and off it went. Okay.
Thank you for the crash course, and I will do some research and reading, but that's helpful.
Thank you. On item 9.4, the recommendation is on the floor. Are there any further questions or comments? Oh, Director Middleton? No, it's all right.
Sorry about that. Reading through the report, it would appear that the building itself that was constructed as greenhouse actually isn't built to the same standard that it would have been had it been permitted and for the use they now want it. Is there something in there that protects us from ensuring that before they can operate that as they're intending to now, that those upgrades will be done?
Yes, so our building bylaw does not require low human occupancy farm buildings up to a certain size from requiring a building permit. They still have safety considerations. There is a national farm building code, but we don't go through the building process for them. Whereas an assembly use building, like things like the doors have to open out for an emergency, there needs to be exit signs, washrooms. Farm buildings may not require person washrooms. There's washrooms for cows perhaps, but barns, I don't know. So they will be, they are aware, they have an architect. They have done the homework to find out what needs to be changed. There are changes that will be required, and they will be getting a building permit for that and an occupancy permit, occupancy certificate for this use. But this is the first step in that. They need the ALC approval. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, seeing no further questions on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 9.5, another agricultural land commission application. Electoral area L. Yeah. Director Houghton? Oh, all right, you're seconding. Do we have any questions or comments on item 9.5? Seeing no hands in the air or on the screen, Director Sal, we have not forgotten you're there. All those
Thank you.
You're welcome. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 10.11, CAO verbal report, and I am informed that there is no report from the CAO. It's going to keep us in suspense until the next meeting. All right, on to item 10.12, committee appointments. This is for information. As per the report, you will see the standing committee appointments. So thank you to everyone who put their names forward. I am now going to turn the floor over to Corporate Officer Campbell, who will conduct the elections for the external committees, which require a board resolution.
Thank you, Chair Roden. So we'll try and get through this as efficiently as possible. I am going to give each director who expressed an interest 30 seconds or minute or less than a minute to perhaps describe or explain why they'd like to be appointed to this external committee. I think it'll help members of the board cast their vote. So for the first external committee, we have the Municipal Finance Authority. They require one director and one alternate. So we have Director Ranta, Director Grenier, Director O'Reilly, and Director Thorpe interested in being on the MFA. So I'll turn it over to Director Ranta first, if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you, my fellow directors. I know many of you are new. The Municipal Finance Authority was established in 1970 and has saved local governments in the province of British Columbia millions and millions and millions of dollars over the years. It has a AAA credit rating from 3 credit rating agencies. I've sat on the Municipal Finance Authority Board of Directors as an appointee of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for many, many years, as opposed to what it says on page 150 of the agenda. I was also appointed to the Municipal Finance Authority from 2012 to 2018, and I served as a trustee. There's one thing to be appointed as a director, and there are about 35 directors, and then at the annual meeting, they elect trustees, 10 trustees during the annual meeting, and I was elected a trustee from whatever it is, 1997 to 2005. So I have an awful lot of experience on the Municipal Finance Authority. I would like to get back to it. What you get if you vote for me, I can tell you, I will bring you comprehensive reports about the activities of the Board of Directors of the Municipal Finance Authority on a regular basis. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Ranta. Director Grenier.
Having heard of Director Ranta's experience, I'll withdraw from this position.
And I should have mentioned that directors who express an interest are welcome to no longer express an interest, or directors who did not express an interest are also welcome to put their interest forward at this point. I will turn it over to Director O'Reilly.
Thank you, General Manager Campbell. I am currently, or I was on the MFA, the representative for the TNRD for the last 2.5 years. I'd like to continue on that role. You know, the board is actually made up of 39 people, and no similar to us. They've had a big overhaul. About 3/4 of the people are new. And so there needs to be some form of continuity and experience on that board. The conversations that I've had with some of the people that are back and hoping to get on is that I will be running to be on the board of trustees, the 10 people that are selected. And I hope to represent the TNRD on that as we get our financing from them, but including the hospital district and the city of Kamloops as well, and all municipalities around this table. So I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Thorpe, you expressed an interest in being either the director or the alternate. Or would you still like to?
Yes. Okay, I'm new to the board, but I like numbers. My background is finance. I'm a retired financial planner. My career was mostly spent in Vancouver. I have a designation in personal financial planning, as well as an Associate Institute of Canadian Bankers, which is a business development plan program for bankers. I held my mutual fund license. What I bring is a fresh perspective in that I'm new. I have experience working in an urban environment, and what I really think is important is my heart and my roots are rural at the same time. So I'm looking for your support, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will have our general manager of operations and our deputy corporate officer hand out the ballots. So we have Director Thorpe, Director O'Reilly, and Director Ranta for the Municipal Insurance Authority. Or sorry, Municipal Finance Authority.
Santa with an arm. So I'm a little out of season at the moment. That goes about it.
You get in, John, there won't be requirement for a microphone and all that.
All good.
So for the Municipal Insurance Association, we only have Director Houghton, who is interested, so you are acclaimed to that position, but we do need an alternate, should Director Houghton not be able to attend the AGM, which is really the only role that this position has. So is there anyone that's interested in being the alternate for the Municipal Insurance Authority? Okay, thank you, Director Hayward. Okay. And I will send you both information about the MIABC. So moving on to the Community Energy Association, we have a number of directors. This is one that we usually have, we have a hard time getting directors interested in. We have a number of directors interested. So we have Director Bass, Director Onslow, Director Blackwell, Director Thorpe, and Director Sow. I just want to confirm that everyone is still interested, who's put their name forward.
I'm not, I probably just checked it because I was looking for something.
Okay.
Sorry, Director.
Oh,
Sorry, Deanna.
sorry, Director Sow.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I actually like to withdraw mine as well.
Okay, and Director, oh, so we have, it's between Director Blackwell and Director Thorpe. Director Blackwell.
If Director Thorpe would like it, that would be absolutely fine with me, and I would stay on as an alternate.
Okay.
Okay.
Director
And you don't
Thorpe,
have to do an election.
that would be
okay.
great, no election.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have Director Thorpe acclaimed to the Community Energy Association with Director Blackwell as the alternate. Yes, exactly. And so moving on to the Kamloops Airport Authority Society, we have Director Morris and Director Grenier interested in that. Would you each like to say why you're interested, or go ahead?
I've actually, I'm pleased in my career, been very involved.
You turn on the button, my noise is not loud. In my past, I've had a lot of involvement with route development strategies for airports, including YYJ, which is Victoria, and then YKA as well. So I think it's an opportunity to bring a skill set to this particular, and then I think that would be a useful addition to the TNRD.
Thank you, Director Morris. Director Grenier.
Thank you. I guess as the son of an airline pilot, I had a general interest in the Kamloops Airport Authority. When I first moved to this area, I got involved with the Kamloops Air Service Advisory Committee under Mel Rothenberger. We were successful in bringing or attracting WestJet to our airport, which I'm pretty glad we did in recent news. In 2017, I didn't think that we were quite achieving our mark. And so as a concerned citizen, I made a presentation to the Kamloops Airport Authority suggesting ways that we could expand business, new routes, particularly attract new carriers, and then work in conjunction with TRU to train airline pilots and flight attendants and opportunities for aviation mechanics. And then in support of that, I went to Montreal, took a course in airport strategic management at the IATA Training Center to back up some of the recommendations that I made. So it's with that I have interest in helping out with Kamloops Airport Authority and seeing if we can get new business to our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grenier. So Director Morris, Director Grenier for the Kamloops Airport Authority Society, and I'll have our ballot handers hand out the ballots. Okay, so through a majority vote, the board will be appointing Director O'Reilly to the MFA. Congratulations, Director O'Reilly. We do have the matter of the alternate. Director Thorpe, you had expressed an interest in being the alternate for MFA. Are you still interested in being the alternate? Okay, so then you would just be acclaimed to that position of alternate. I will send you both information because there is an AGM coming up in March. And the board has appointed Director Morris to the Kamloops Airport Authority Society. Congratulations. Director Grenier, would you be interested in being the alternate? Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for those who put their names forward for the standing committees and the external committees. We move on to item 10.1.3, contract award for primary 911 call answering service. There is a recommendation. Director Rain, second Director Vice Chair Smith. Thank you. Any discussion? Director Buppel?
Thank you, Chair Roden. And I don't know who on staff could answer this, but when contracts are appointed or like this is just for 1 year, but typically they're for 5. Is there an evaluation process for the services that are delivered by 911? And if so, is it done for the TNRD or do all of the regional districts who share the service do it together in terms of the evaluation? And does that evaluation come back to the board in terms of this level of service and that type of thing?
Yeah, through the chair, I can answer that question. So my understanding, I wasn't involved in the process last time it went to a public competition, but my understanding was that a committee was formed of the different regional districts to do the evaluation. And then the contract award, including the evaluation results, would have come back to this board or individual boards for the contract award.
Actually, I wasn't looking for when the contract is awarded. It was more whether we evaluate the service that has been delivered.
Like the previous level of service from the contractor?
That's right. Do we evaluate it either for the TNRD or collectively for all of the regional districts that share that service?
Yes, so there's it's evaluated on an ongoing basis with a working group representing those 8 regional districts. So any service issues go through that working group made up of those different regional district representatives. So the answer is yes. We would evaluate it at renewing the contract and negotiating the contract as well as an ongoing basis.
Director Newstainer?
Thank you through the chair. I'm just curious about how the cost breakdown is determined, how the portion, is it by population?
I'm trying to remember the answer to that. I believe it's by population. I'll need to double check and get back. It's either by population or by address points. Let me check into that one.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Director Middleton.
It's all these new people asking questions. And when we say we're extending that contract in that amount, that 282,669 for 1 year, is that at the same or close to the same dollar value that we were paying in previous annual amounts, or is this a big jump in price?
Thanks, through the chair. So yes, it's close, but it's an increase in price by, I believe, about a 5% increase, if I remember correctly. I should have put the increase in there. And those increases are based on, again, as a group, we negotiate the pricing for the 1 year extension. And the background, the reason that we aren't doing a longer term extension of our procurement process is because the next generation 911 are anticipating significant changes and going through a procurement process at that time. So.
Thank you. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Item 10.1.4, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund.
So moved.
Thank you. Are there any, Director Stamer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, to staff. If we weren't successful in this CFPF grant of $30,000, what is the likability of getting that grant? And if we don't get the grant, is there monies that we can find in our regular budget?
We do have money within the budget to support the ESS teams. This would be money over and above that we can buy new, better equipment. It wouldn't hinder our current operations. However, this would help make them better by having this additional money to buy better new replacement equipment.
Director Bepple?
Thanks, through to staff. I know because I've volunteered a lot at the ESS that there's often a lot of crossover of ESS people from different communities. So people maybe come from Clearwater or Barrier into Kamloops for emergencies. I'm sure that they might go the other direction too, but I've only been in Kamloops. So I was wondering, is there an opportunity to pool resources between municipalities in terms of the training or the equipment? Are we going to be collaborating in any way to strengthen the ESS, not just for the TNRD, but for some of the other municipalities within the TNRD?
Thank you. Through the chair, I guess I'll answer that two ways. Collaborating in terms of training, yes, we do that on an ongoing basis and coordinate our training activities. And part of the reason that there's the kind of crossover during emergency that you refer to is partially to take advantage of those, live action training opportunities to get people from different ESS teams to work in other events when they're happening. In terms of equipment sharing, I would say that would be uncommon. It's typically not needed. There's usually enough equipment within each team, but I don't see why we couldn't share equipment if there was a need to, as staff or volunteers from one ESS team come to help another if they needed to bring additional equipment to them. I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen.
Right, but this also says to facilitate training opportunities. So this might allow for some collaboration with some of the municipalities within the region?
Yes, correct. The training opportunities would be already designed around local training. So we might host one or two different training events and bring in multiple ESS teams that same training opportunity. And just as a sidebar, the ESS teams outside the city of Kamloops service both the TNRD rural areas as well as those smaller municipalities in most of this community.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. 10.1.5 BC Destination Development Fund Grant.
Recommendation.
Thank you, Director Laird. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this? Director Blackwell?
Yeah, just be aware that District of Clearwater, I believe, has received grant funding just recently for a very similar project, same amount. So hopefully there's some collaboration on that. So cost savings and effort saved. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? On the question, then all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. We have for information, TNRD building permit activity highlights for December of 2022. Does anyone have any comments to make on those figures? All right, we move on to committees, and for information, there is the draft of the Fraser Basin Council meeting from January 10th, 2023. Did anyone have any comments on that? All right, we have some action requested from the Fraser Basin Council. This arises out of their delegation at our last meeting, and there is a staff recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith.
Second.
Director Blackwell seconds. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all on the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We have some information only correspondence from the District of Logan Lake. Any comments on that? Move on to new business. Director Sarai is not here, but Director Stamer, I believe, wants to speak to us about the Southern Interior Local Government Association.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief. So again, SILGA is having their annual convention on the 25th to the 28th of April in Vernon. They will be sending the link. I'm on the board. So we're going to be sending the link that was presented in SILGA in Salmon Arm last year, which was just a video presentation, something that's real easy to put up, in your municipalities or whatever. And we're going to just put it out to all the municipalities and area directors. And just as a reminder, particularly for some of the new members, that, SILGA encompasses this whole region from Osoyoos to 100 Mile to Golden and everywhere in between. And, that you're not going to get a better place to meet and network, not only people like ourselves, but members of all the Crown corporations, most of the major utilities, highways, all kinds of people that I can remember from 2007, which was the first year I was elected as a councillor. In 2008 was in Vernon. The contacts that I met at that convention, I'm still using today. And when you get that opportunity on a one-to-one basis, where all of a sudden there's a question or a concern, and you can pick up the phone and talk to that person directly, I can't tell you how valuable that is. And also to remind all our municipal directors that if you have a choice between, particularly you've got new members of council with you, and the importance between SILGA and UBCM, I would suggest SILGA. Not only because of the cost, because you're not going to Vancouver, it's Vernon, very close, but also, again, you're going to meet people like ourselves that have the same concerns, same questions, same things that are going on in their communities. And what better opportunity than be able to go to Vernon for 3 days and do it. Couple of quick things, just as a reminder, resolutions that will be put forth at SILGA must be received by the 24th of February. That's important. Any last minute resolutions are on an emergency basis only. They have to be received before 24 hours before the convention actually starts, and it has to be regional in nature. It can't be just a specific concern in a specific municipality or director. There's also going to be a real effort, as much as we can, to be all inclusive in regards to mobility and access. In other words, buses, elevators, those kinds of things, because sometimes, people do have issues with that. And we're going to try to do our very best to make sure that everybody can participate. I know the first night, I believe, is in a facility that has 2 levels. We're going to do exactly the same thing on both levels. Going to have the opportunity that if you do have it doesn't have an elevator. So that was brought up in the meeting, and we'll make sure that if you can only be on the ground floor, you're not going to miss out on what's going on the top floor. So you're going to try to do as best we can, especially coming out of COVID. I think this is a really good opportunity for us to come together with all our municipalities, all our directors, support our organization, and I look forward to seeing everyone in Vernon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, the networking opportunities, especially for new directors at SILGA, is awesome, because it is all people from this region of the province. UBCM, of course, much bigger, much more diverse, but that regionality can be very helpful for directors from this area to reach out and network with people who are sharing many of the same concerns and challenges that we are in our communities and in our electoral areas. All right, thank you very much, Director Stamer. We move on to item 13.2, which is a request that a letter be sent to the Minister of International Development. We do have a recommendation, but before we have that, Director Thorpe, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Chair. As many of you know, when the Lytton Creek wildfire happened in 2021, there were residents and businesses just outside the village that were impacted by that wildfire. Approximately 7 businesses and 13 residents were affected by the Lytton Creek wildfire. There appears to be a disconnect or lack of understanding at the provincial and federal level that these properties under TNRD jurisdiction are either within the Village of Lytton boundaries or that they're on First Nations land. In speaking with MP Brad Viss's office, The federal government is under the impression that several businesses outside of Village of Lytton boundaries, including one of the community's largest employers, are within the village. That is incorrect. This disconnect is impacting TNRD businesses and residents' ability to access government funding that's being made available to Village of Lytton residents and businesses. I'm asking that Area I properties surrounding the Village of Lytton be included in government funding. The 2021 wildfire, it didn't know boundaries. And it seems not quite fair that there are these sort of boundaries being put on funding now. And I think before the funding is actually tightened up and it very specifically says, nope, just Village of Lytton, nobody else, that we need to make them aware of the geographical implications and that these businesses and residents are really right beside the village, but they're not in the village. And they deserve the same kind of funding opportunities as those within the village. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Director Thorpe. And so we do have a recommendation. Would you like to move that recommendation? Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Any comments or questions? Director O'Connor.
Thank you. I'm in absolute support of this letter. I think that needs to be clarified. When Minister Sajan made the announcement last June for $77 million, I was under the assumption that it included the Lytton area. We've been having conversations with Pacific Camp about the business and the homeowner grants. They're not grants, I shouldn't use that word, programs they're trying to figure out. The business programs they're looking at are loans. The grants for the homeowners are looking at for insured only rebuilding to net zero or to fire safe. And we've been having that conversation with Pacifican to try to include uninsured because we just don't understand the why only insured people would receive that special funding for rebuilding to those special standards. The other question I have, and being new to TNRD, is where does First Nations fit into this? There were a number of, I know First Nation on reserve vote for TNRD rep. There were a number of privately owned homes on reserve. I'm just wondering whether they would fit in this as well in the regional district support or how that works.
That is a really excellent question to which I do not have an answer. CEO Hildebrand?
Thank you, Chair Roden. I can try, but based on what I've heard is that they may have a different envelope of money with First Nations. But that's some of the clarification we're going to need to find out through the minister, but that's what I've been told. I just don't know if that's fact.
Good, yeah. And the wording in the recommendation says, electoral area I surrounding the Village of Lytton boundaries. I'm just wondering where that fits in, particularly businesses. I know the wildfire went right up to Shacken, which I think is still in area I. Just to be looking at that as well. Because there would have been a number of businesses impacted in the Nicola Valley by the wildfire as well.
I guess just as a follow-up, that'll be also determined in that discussion on kind of where that boundary would start and end.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Director Rain?
Perhaps a friendly amendment, but surrounding, the word surrounding there makes me a little nervous. Could we use the word contiguous? You know, I'm thinking that it's then part of the city of, you know, I just see some bureaucrat saying surrounding. Is that 50 Ks, 100 Ks? How big an area do you want? You know, and when you say contiguous, at least you're saying this relates to Lytton itself as the center. Friendly.
Okay. That as a friendly amendment.
Chair, I missed what Director Rain's friendly amendment was.
He asked that in the recommendation where it says residents and businesses in electoral area I surrounding the village of Lytton. He suggested that it be changed to in electoral area I contiguous to the village of Lytton.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
And if I understand correctly, since the motion has been moved and seconded, it belongs to everyone. So if everyone is good with that, we do not actually need to vote on an amendment.
That's right. And it's a very minor change.
Pardon me? Yeah, it's a very minor change. All right, thank you. Are there any other comments on this recommendation? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We move on to item 14. We have a notice of motion. This is Director Grenier's notice of motion, which he read at the last meeting. So it is here for you. We do not need to read it again, but Director Grenier, would you like to make this motion?
Thank you, Chair. This is really following on the suggestion of the Planning Department to review this CD1 zoning because of the number of amendments that had been coming through. And it's somewhat timely, given the timing of the CD1 zoning and the varying changes that have been taking place in this area. So that's what the motion speaks to, and I think it's pretty straightforward.
All right, so we need a seconder for that. Second, thank you. So this is going to direct staff to bring a report to the board on recent years of land use applications in Tobiano and a review of the CD1 terminology and outline of the challenges with administering that zoning. So that will come back before us. Does anyone have any questions, comments? No? All right, then, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Question period. Do we have any questions? I would guess no. No, what, oh, I don't know, Director O'Reilly, you might have to move and sit up in the gallery.
Well, no, sorry. I didn't know. I mean, now that new business, we have to have our name under, you can't just talk about. Oh, you can't. Sorry, I thought you had to put it in ahead of time as it was indicated on here. So go ahead.
So you can raise something under new business as long as it's not substantially something substantive. That would be properly a notice of motion, but oftentimes directors in advance of the agenda will let staff know that they have an item, so we'll sort of know in advance, but if we don't know in advance, then yes, you can raise something under new business.
Okay. Well, if I may, Madam Chair, if you'll allow, I just want to just go back to the FCM draws and conference, and specifically for the Kamloops directors. A lot of us are already pre-committed for the Memorial Cup that are here this week. We'll be working and volunteering and taking ceremonial roles during that. So I can't imagine any of us will want to be in for that first one. So I don't know how that will affect when this comes forward, but just so everybody knows that a lot of us will be working in that.
But not all of us.
Yeah, and some of us just have tickets, so.
So I think the way to handle that would be if anyone knows ahead of time that they will not be available to go to Toronto this year for FCM because of Memorial Cup and related activities. Might be an idea to see Corporate Officer Campbell at the close of this meeting, just so that we can make a note. And
To the Chair Roden, I prefer that the directors contact Chelsea because she's coordinating all of the travel and accommodations and registrations for conventions and conferences. So if you could reach out to Chelsea directly, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Roden, if I could just also add, Chelsea's already, she's been listening to the meeting and she's already put together a spreadsheet now and divvied up the 4 years and did it randomly. But what she'll do then, if it's okay with the board, would just simply erase those names that are going to follow up with her. And then there may be some that we're going to have to draw again that may end up going twice over the 4 years if possible, or we may have to come back to the board for a decision, but we'll endeavor to get that out to you tomorrow.
all right, thank you very much. All right, we have a motion here to go into a closed meeting.
So moved.
Second, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, so I am going to adjourn this meeting that we are in right now, and we will reconvene in 10 minutes for a closed meeting.